Okay, so I want to welcome you again and say how glad I am that you're here to practice with me, because otherwise I'd be very lonely in this big room all by myself. And glad that you're joining us for this opportunity to practice with the 5 precepts. So these are ways of practicing and bringing into being integrity, care, and wise action in the world. So I want to offer a little bit of an overview first about the 5 precepts, and actually spend a little time with the language that they were originally offered in, because I think that's really important, because it helps us to understand them as practices and places of inquiry rather than shoulds or I musts or commandments, which is where a lot of religious wounding comes from. And I've been practicing with the 5 precepts a lot this year. Every time I sit in the morning, I've been connecting with them, running through them in my mind, saying them in my mind or aloud, and thinking about each one as an alive practice, like what's my relationship to this precept today? Do I commit to this today? And do I commit to being sensitive and watchful to where opportunities are presenting themselves for me to practice with the precepts? And these may seem sort of mundane when you look at them, like kind of obvious or ordinary. Yeah, we get it. Don't steal, don't kill, don't lie, don't do bad things that hurt people. And yet, we see again and again in our own lives that these commitments to integrity actually require constant awareness and practice. They are a lifelong practice for us. And, we've seen how very practiced spiritual leaders in Buddhist lineages and other wisdom traditions have not perfected or held the practices that they teach, often to great harm and detriment of their communities. So these are foundational, but they're not so simple to practice. The words are fairly simple, and the applications and the shadings require a lot of sensitivity. So everything on the spiritual path, the Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path, rests on what we call Sila, or ethical integrity. This is the part of the path that invites us directly into the practices of wise speech, wise action, and wise livelihood. And earlier this year, we looked at each step on the Eightfold Path. And the 5 precepts are actually how we practice wise action and wise speech. And the Buddha recognized that being human, having this embodied experience, comes with certain things built in. We have a body with biologic needs. We have drives. We have a survival drive. We have a sex drive. We have a social drive. And the drives that keep us alive can also lead to actions that are shaped by a lot of craving, aversion, and delusion. It's pretty easy to act unskillfully, intentionally or unintentionally, in the service of these drives, of getting what we need or believe that we need to be safe, to be healthy, to be well in the world. And then according to the culture that we live in, it's a very, very long list of things that we need to acquire and to defend, and a very expensive list, in order to be safe, in order to thrive, in order to live our best lives. And so chasing after the items on that list can lead to a lot of unskillfulness, because it tends to separate ourselves from others, separating ourselves from the totality of creation, imagining, feeling that just because our experience seems to be located in this body, that this is the only body that matters. And great religions and wisdom traditions the world over remind us again and again of our place in the world, and better said, our belonging in the world, and to each other. When we truly believe that we belong to each other, then we'll start to care for each other. And when we care for each other, we'll pay attention to how we treat each other. And then that's what the 5 precepts are all about. And in this world and country right now that is ethically unmoored, disconnected at the highest levels of influence and leadership, where violence and corruption and appropriation and delusion are not just rampant, but seemingly celebrated. In this kind of world, it becomes an act of deep care and also defiance, spiritual defiance, to associate ourselves with the practice of ethical integrity, keeping that Sila. So, 5 precepts, simple enough list, you may have one in your hands, and also deeply profound. And the list is only 5 for us. It's for lay people, people who have not committed to becoming monastics in this lifetime. If we were monastics, we would have hundreds of precepts to keep. But we just have 5. 5 places to bring our awareness, our intention, and our practice. And in a world that's so in need of safety and refuge, our practice of the precepts is a gift to say to the world, you don't have to fear me. I commit to behave in ways that offer safety. That's a big statement. That's a big gift to this world. So I want to spend a few minutes considering the language of the precepts, how they're presented to us, and how we're being invited into them. And just to know that in many Buddhist cultures, the precepts are something that lay people will chant every day in the morning. And folks do that in this country too, of course. And some sanghas, many sanghas will chant the refuges and the precepts together once a month or more. And when we go on silent retreat, as some of us did recently up at Big Bear, the first night we always take the refuges. Refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And we also agree to live by these 5 precepts. They become our community container. So let's look at each one, briefly name it, and consider the original invitation. They're presented in many different ways because, of course, they're offered in one language and then translated into English. But simply, I undertake the training to refrain from destroying life. I undertake the training to refrain from taking what is not given. I undertake the training to refrain from causing harm through my sexual actions. I undertake the training to refrain from false speech. I undertake the training to refrain from intoxicants that lead to heedlessness. So these are all formulated in terms of what we are not doing. So they're pointing out what we are letting go of, highlighting the actions that cause harm to other beings. And so there's naturally, when we look at them, an invitation to think about what this non-doing makes space for. So when I say the precepts to myself, I also add what I would like to do. So, I was going to put this in the chat too, so folks online have this. It's just a link, but it will show you what folks in the room have in their hands. Because the line under the precept that's in italics is, what I add for myself, and we can all add our own. So I undertake the training to refrain from destroying life, and I undertake the training to protect and care for lives. I undertake the training to refrain from taking what isn't given, and I undertake the training of generosity and letting go. I undertake the training of not causing harm through my sexual actions, and I undertake the training to relate caringly with others. I undertake the training to refrain from using false speech, and I undertake the training to speak what is true, what is kind, what is connecting, and what is useful. And the fifth precept, I undertake the training to refrain from the use of intoxicants that cloud the mind and cause heedlessness. And I undertake the training to be mindful and present for the safety of myself and for others. And this is a conscious practice. We look at our day, like, can I keep all of these precepts today? And I do that regularly. Like, can I keep the fifth precept today? Let's see. And when we take them, we want to keep them so that we believe in our word. So it's a very conscious undertaking. And the language that's used is literal and intentional. And I really want to point out, if you look at the sheet, the words that appear in each of them in the Pali, Varamani Sikapadam Samadhiyami. And Samadhiyami is I undertake, I take upon myself. Sikapadam is training. Varamani is abstaining from. So it's not that I'm being told to take on these ways of relating. We choose to do this for ourselves. I choose to train myself, my mind, my body, my heart in these directions of safety and care. And in the invitation to this series on the 5 precepts, we said there's no one keeping score. No one keeping score except we ourselves. And there are no penalties when we break a precept except for the natural results of having done so. So this is a practice we do for ourselves because we choose to do it. We offer as a gift to the world. Because it's easier to live with ourselves when we aren't living in regret over how we've treated others. And this is part of why it's a foundation for the whole practice. Let's act in ways that support the heart to be glad and non-regretful, so that when we sit down, we can actually access some calm and stillness that leads to the clear seeing that's the heart of this whole practice. So today we're centering the third precept, and this is the one about sex, or rather about sexual energy and action, how we express it, how we use it without causing harm. And I want to point out the literal translation of the third precept. It's actually, I undertake the training to abstain from sensual misconduct. I know the sheet says sexual, but the actual Pali is about sensual misconduct. And since the Buddha's time, this has always been directed toward sexual action. But for some of us, people who are asexual or who live celibate lives or who are single or whose sexual energy has shifted to be less strong, the question of sexual expression with a partner may not be the live one for us. But the precept still has something to offer, a practice with the energy itself, with the field of sense pleasure. How we meet desire when it arises. So the original language is broader and includes our actions around sense pleasures in general, how those actions impact our relations with loved ones, with communities, with the world. And so I want to hold both approaches today. And starting with the traditional teachings around sexuality. So if we were keeping those 227 or 300 precepts that the monks and nuns keep, we would be taking a precept of celibacy, complete celibacy. But the version for lay people is simply about not causing harm to others through the ways that we express our sexual energies. And that's what I really want to underline most of all this morning, that the Buddha's teaching is not about who or how we love. It's not about the acts or orientations. It's not about the form they take. but it's about relationship. Is there caring and safety in the meeting? And I want to be really explicit about this because this was a very difficult area for me coming into the Dharma. And my misunderstanding of what the Buddha actually taught kept me at a distance from the practice for 10 years at least. So when I became interested in Buddhism in the early 90s and I wanted to learn more about the teachings, I knew I needed to make sure that I was welcome, all of me was welcome in the practice community, because I'd been in churches and communities before where I wasn't welcome as a gay man. And I didn't know very much about the teachings, just had a general sort of interest and attraction to them. And this was pre-internet, so getting information wasn't so easy. And I didn't know any Buddhists at the time, except for a college housemate from years earlier who was devout and peaceful seeming, but kind of uncomfortable with gay people. And so that was another reason I wanted to check this out. And so I would just kind of pick up books that looked interesting or had cool pictures, and I was what you might call a bedside table Buddhist. And at the end of the day, busy work day, I'd pick up one of my books and I'd read a few words, or I'd look at some of the pictures and then I'd put it down and go off to sleep. So I wasn't really reading or studying. It was more looking than reading. It was more sort of honoring an intention, a placeholder. Sometime, someday, I'm going to check this out. And I needed to center and tend to my identity and experience as a gay man in a homophobic, shaming world, growing up wounded and marginalized because of my identity, particularly in religious settings. And so approaching Buddhism, I've got to make sure I'm okay here. And as I said, I didn't know very much, but I knew that the Dalai Lama was the highest profile Buddhist. And in my mind, of course, he must speak for all Buddhists. And so I checked to see what he thought about sexuality. And at that time, his understanding, which was informed more through culture and tradition than Dharma, was that homosexual activity was sexual misconduct, along with many forms of heterosexual activity. And I didn't know that the Dalai Lama didn't speak for all Buddhists, or that he was speaking from a particular place as a Tibetan monastic in a particular lineage. And so I thought, okay, that's it, too bad, not for me, I guess. And so I set my interest aside for a long time. I did keep those books on my table, mostly just checking out the beautiful words, the images of statues and bodhisattvas and different Buddhas. But I felt excluded from that world because I didn't feel like it had any space for me, because of the way sexual misconduct had been defined through the lens of culture than what the Buddha actually said. And this is important to be aware of, because later commentators and communities have often interpreted or even misrepresented the Dharma because of culture, or in the service of hoarding power and excluding people from the Dharma. Monastic women in particular, for ages. And it took some time, but eventually I looked into it again. Am I welcome or not? And I found more sources and actually came to understand what the true teaching of the third precept is about, and what the Buddha actually taught about sexual misconduct comes down to harm, lack of consent, and untruthfulness. So again, the forms that our sexual expression take, whether heterosexual, gay, monogamous, polyamorous, are not categorized as good or bad. What's important in the precept and the practice of the precept is how we engage with others. Is there willing and informed consent from all involved? Are the participants adults and capable of consent? Are any commitments made to others outside of the meeting respected and honored? Is there a commitment in the meeting, an intention for safety and non-harming? And this is such a deep question when we engage in sexual activity. Does the intention of the meeting, the coming together, include healing, connection, joy? So again, particular is not important. What is important is that the expression of sexuality doesn't lead to wrongdoing or harm or shame. And so there's such an edge of practice here, how to be intimate with our places of woundedness that come up around sex, shame that comes up around sex, and how we may act from those places, and being sensitive to our conscious and unconscious places of pain that get activated, and caring about how we hold ourselves and how we relate to our partners and to their wounded places and their tender spots. Is this sexual activity about relation, or is it about getting something that I want that doesn't really care for the partner or partners involved? Is it about cultivating relationship and connection, or is it more about a release of obsessive thought and bodily energy? When there is a sexual exchange in our lives, we can notice what is the echo of that action? What's the aftertaste, the reverberation? Once the heat is dissipated, what is there? Is there a sense of connecting or even healing? Such a broad swath of territory. There's the body and chemistry, desire, craving, loneliness, the need to connect. There's joy and playfulness and release. Sometimes there's numbness and dissociation. Sometimes there's aliveness and presence. And because sexual energy as a drive is so, so powerful, it's really helpful to notice who is in the driver's seat. Even before it's expressed externally, how is it being felt internally? And what is that internal relationship like? How conscious is it? And so I'm not talking about suppressing our sexuality or that energy in any way. It's part of living in a human body with human chemistry and hormones and conditioning. Just like our survival and social drives and the thinking mind, it's here to be known, experienced, and related to. But is it possible for me to see the energy arise, move through me, whether expressed externally or not? And can I see it as energy and not defining who I am? And the question with all of the precepts is, what am I cultivating in my actions? And what do I want to cultivate? And so the precepts are reminders of our choice and our capacity for growth and change. And so as I mentioned earlier, for a variety of reasons, sex may not be the energy that we're working with so much. And so it's really helpful to reflect that this precept is encompassing sensuality as well. I undertake the training to abstain from wrong conduct in the realm of sense pleasures. So that really opens up how we can practice with this precept. Is my pursuit of pleasure in general harmful to others? So if I spend all evening scrolling on my phone, am I present for my partners in relationship? Am I having a relationship with my phone or the real person or people in front of me? If I think that I have to chase every pleasure-delivering acquisition that's available in this culture, what is my footprint on the environment? And does that acquisition rest on the exploitation of other people, of animals, the earth's resources? Am I taking more than my share in the pursuit of personal pleasure? What's the cost to others? And the more that we entertain fantasies of sexual pleasure or any sensual pleasure, the more we tend to think about them. They become a groove in our thinking, an inclination of the mind. Often they loop. So we can practice sometimes when there is obsessive thinking about getting that thing, whatever it is, seeing if we can drop the object of the story, drop the craving, and actually tune into feeling the body in that moment. Feel how the fantasy is registered in the body. Perhaps there's an aliveness, a buzzing. Perhaps there's a sort of yearning, a forward movement. Just seeing how it arises, how it manifests, and how it moves through us. We can't transcend this biology, and suppressing that experience doesn't really lead to wisdom. So working mindfully with whatever is here is the path. This is the Buddha's path, probably the most simply stated. And noticing the seeds that we're watering as we're wanting, as we're craving, and seeing if we have choice. So whether we read this precept as being about sexual expression or the whole field of sense-based pleasures, it's really concerned with how we are treating other beings. How does my pursuit of pleasure impact others? And how does it impact me? And how do the impacts on me affect how I treat other beings? We're always beings in process. What we think, what we do, and what we repeat again and again make an imprint in our minds and our hearts. It shapes who we are in the world and how we move through the world. Am I cultivating presence and care, or am I cultivating something that I don't want to be living with tomorrow and that I don't want to offer you if I'm really caring? And as we practice with the precepts, these 5 beautiful, simple-seeming invitations, we may notice that we become more at peace with ourselves, less regretful, more at peace in the world, less encumbered with worries and self-doubt, and actively adding to the safety of a world that needs that so much. And a way of practicing with this precept, if you'd like to this week, is to reflect, what are the echoes? What's the aftertaste? So noticing this week after moments of sense pleasures, whatever kind, sexual, social, seeking validation, or acquiring that thing, pausing and noticing the reverberation. Not to judge it, just to know it. Maybe asking, is there connection, or is there a little hollowness? Is there gladness, or is there some faint regret? Is there ease in the body, or is there tightness? And letting that knowing teach you. Letting the knowing of how following or not following the precept registers in the body and in your life. Okay, so let's just take a couple of minutes to allow the words to settle and maybe see what comes up for you. And then we'll open the floor, but just taking a couple of minutes. Okay, so I want to open the rest of the meeting for any thoughts, anything that you'd like to share, ask, rebut on the 5 precepts in general or the third precept in particular. And whatever is coming up for you is welcome. So I think we need to stop here. And thank you so much for the interesting questions and conversation and giving me the opportunity to delve into this precept. And just as always, invite you to support us in any way that you can. And also would like to close by offering our dedication of merit, which I'm going to share on the screen for folks who are online. And please feel free to take home the precepts if you'd like to. Maybe follow the link and see Manzanita Village's other precepts, formulations. And I'm just going to share the screen. Okay, so let's offer this together. Going forth into this world so in need of light, may I bring all the kindness and wisdom I embody to each being and each situation that I meet. May the power of my practice today strengthen my resolve to be an agent of peace and justice in this world. Going forth together into this world so in need of light, may we together bring all the kindness and wisdom we embody to each being and each situation that we meet. May the power of our practice today strengthen our resolve to be agents of peace and justice in this world. We dedicate our practice for the liberation of all beings, the great, the small, the wise, the ignorant, the powerful, and the powerless. May all beings be liberated from sorrow and loss, hatred and injustice, scarcity and want, and every form of suffering. May our practice today be a prayer for peace, and may it benefit all beings without exception. Thank you all so much, and please come back next week for the precept on truthfulness. Thank you too. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
So good to see you all. Hey, Beth.